Broadcasting live from the IRSMedic studios, it's Parental Advisory. Welcome to Parental Advisory. We are live, and we are welcoming a guest today, Bill Loftus, who's one of the 4 founding partners of LLBH Wealth Management, based in Westport, Connecticut, with offices in Los Angeles as well. Now, Bill has a career spanning almost 30 years. 30 years. So he has, a bit of experience that he can share with us today. And today, I'm very interested in this topic. I'm not wealthy enough yet, I believe, to take advantage of this, but hopefully,
you're getting
fingers
close.
crossed
You're
one day.
getting close. I can tell. I can tell. You stick with me.
We're going to find out if you can actually opt out of the tax system. One would think that's impossible, but apparently we may learn otherwise today. So, Bill, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Claudine, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. I want to thank my good friend Anthony Parent for inviting me on this call to discuss what we think is an incredibly timely and beneficial investment strategy aimed not just for U.S. citizens, but also for citizens around the world who may be contemplating a move to the United States.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Bill's got some. I mean, he's got some great ideas, and what we're talking about, and to remove the mystery, is something called private placement life insurance, other known as PPLI, and it's something that back in 2005, when we were sort of figuring out what move we were going to bring our practice into, I started looking out. I want to know. It's like, well, what is the best possible tax avoidance strategy out there? What are the best tax shelters? And through my research, I came up with this one thing, PPLI, and just trying to learn all I can about it. I'm like, hey, I'll add this into my practice area. Ran up against a few hurdles. First of all, the attorney can't really quarterback the PPLI. There's a role for an attorney in the whole transaction, but it's not really the driving force of it. And also, you kind of need the clients. Kind of something I was missing there. But you need some wealthy clients. And what surprised me is that, then I was like, well, you know what? Somebody's already probably cornered the market. It's probably saturated. It's obviously the best thing out there. So it must be everybody and their mother must be doing it. And but then I found out, no, actually, nobody is doing it. And I would ask insurance guys, fund guys all the time, hey, you've been doing this PPLI? And people look at me, what are you talking about? And Bill is one of the rare people. He was in 2011, he and I met with a mutual client with a pretty big tax problem. And I said, hey, you ever hear of this PPLI? And then Bill went off, and his knowledge far exceeded mine. And I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And so he started telling me some of the things he's been doing.
Now, Bill, how did you originally hear about PPLI? Was it just something you sort of came across?
It's interesting. It was, to sort of take you back to 2010, at the time, the tax laws had changed regarding the repatriation of offshore monies back into the United States. You may recall that a number of private equity and hedge fund general partners had been able to place their money offshore in these deferral programs. So, and there were billions of dollars, actually hundreds of billions of dollars in offshore money that was being housed, sort of kept offshore on behalf of hedge fund general partners. And the tax laws then put in place the IRS put in place a circular that said that the money had to be repatriated back on shore by, I think it was 2017. So a number of hedge fund GP and private equity GPs were faced with the prospect of having to bring their money back into the United States, and in so doing, they would have an ordinary income tax on their carried interest, which is the promote they make on their funds. So we started looking at this and saying, okay, what can we do as a tax strategy to help them? And we came up with, along with several law firms, we came up with the concept of creating something known as a charitable lead trust, which permits them to get a philanthropic deduction for the money they bring back on shore. But once the assets are in this trust, it's a grantor trust, which means that the person or the entity that makes the contribution into the trust would then be charged with paying tax. So what you wanted to do was to create a tax-free investment strategy that lived inside this charitable lead trust. So we started looking at this and came up with the idea that private placement life insurance would be perfect. Because what in effect it does is, in very simple terms, private placement life insurance is an investment portfolio, can be invested in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, hedge funds, cash, with essentially a tax-free wrapper around it. So the assets grow on a capital gains tax-free, income tax-free, and if set up the right way, in many cases, estate tax-free. So we kind of backed into it as a tax planning strategy for ultra high net worth individuals who were patriating money back into the United States and faced with the prospect of paying a significant ordinary income tax rate.
So all that deferral, and by the way, just to give you some idea what deferral is, when Bill's talking about, by the way, Bill is a better tax attorney than most tax attorneys. He really thinks things out. He's not a tax attorney, but I'll tell you, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, and he's really somebody who knows his stuff. Some of the things that he said, deferral, that was always one of those, that deferral means that you're allowed, your money's growing tax-free. That once upon repatriation, meaning you bring it back to the U.S., at that point it becomes taxable. So that's like, you're looking at, it's like sort of like your a 401k that's growing and you think it's worth $200,000, right? Or, whatever it is, just let's get the smaller one. But no, it's really not, because you have to take that tax hit all in 1 year. So now you've just, now you're up in the highest tax bracket. So that's really the awful thing. She's like, yeah, that's wonderful. You've had all this years of tax-free growth and deferral, and that's the entire game of going offshore. Is usually it's the entire game is just deferring it, doing what a 401k does with a larger money, because as soon as you go over a certain income level, you can't do that. So you're just trying to put your money overseas so it can grow tax free, and you're fine paying taxes on repatriation, or somewhat fine. But when you're forced to do it all in a short amount of time, you can't spread out that tax load. You actually have to take a huge hit in one day. And so, Bill, you were able to put it into charitable trust to remove that tax burden for the year of repatriation.
Right.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah, so what we did, Anthony, was we set up charitable lead trusts, charitable lead annuity trusts, CLAT for short. And the way it works is the money comes back in, and so let's just use an example of, say, $10 million for argument's sake. So $10 million comes back into a trust. You get roughly a 30% tax deduction, so a $3 million tax deduction, which would effectively offset most of, if not all of, the ordinary income tax hit that comes, that you're responsible for as a result of the repatriation. So effectively what you've done is you've wiped out a large part of the tax. Then you set up the, inside the CLAT, you set up the private placement life insurance policy. Now the policy, the reason why that's important is because in a charitable lead annuity trust, you have to pay the charity on an annual basis. You're responsible for paying them something, okay? And you're responsible generally for a term of payments. It's usually between 20 and 30 years. So over the course of the 20 years, you have got to pay out the original principal, the $10 million that you took in. That's how you get the charitable tax deduction.
Okay.
What you hope happens is, and right now, as you know, we're in a low interest rate environment. So these payments are predicated right now. For example, on a 30-year CLAT, your federal rate that you've got to pay out for it to look and feel like a charity is roughly 3% per year.
Okay.
So in round numbers, over the course of 30 years, you might pay out, say, $2 million of payments to the underlying charities. What you hope happens is you earn between, say, 6 and 7% on your investment program, okay?
Okay.
On an after-tax basis. Well, in our opinion, the best way to do that is through a private placement life insurance policy. So you earn your 6 or 7% tax-free, you pay out 3%. The way the math works, at the conclusion of 30 years, you have something closer to what you've got in your private placement policy is you have maybe, call it $4 to $4.5 million. You've paid out $2 million. Now you have $2 to $2.5 million of residual or surplus benefit. What you do in that scenario is you then gift that down to your children or your heirs in the form of a couple of trusts. So what you've been able to do, and by the way, that's done on an estate tax-free basis. So what you've been able to do, if you think about this, is you've been able to get a tax deduction in a year when you really need it the most. You've been able to fulfill your philanthropic goals, and most of our clients are philanthropic, and they contribute annually to different types of charities. You've been able to grow an asset base in addition that will go down to your kids. And then finally, you've been able to do it in a way that avoids estate tax. And estate tax for most of our clients, when you get over for husband and wife this year, it's about $5.5 million per person. So effectively, you have about $11 million worth of estate tax exemption per couple. Most of our clients exceed that. So they find themselves in, depending upon the state that they live in, if it's New York State, they can be in a federal bracket of 40%, state bracket of say 15-16%. So effectively, what they've done is they've saved 55%, on estate taxes. So if they can put $2 to $3 million down to their kids, they've saved between $1 million to $1.5 million in estate tax.
Wow. Now, here's my question for you. So let's just say that you're not. Let's just say that you have none of this offshore issue going on. Let's just say that you have a business that's successful and someone has come along with that big old check. That's your number. That's the number you're looking for. And let's just say it's $50 million to buy your business. And that's the number you've been waiting for. That's the number you've been hoping for. And there's the check. Now, my question is because this was my assumption, okay, was that, all right, you got that $50 million. You're going to take the hit on that, okay? But once you take the hit on that, now dump it into PPLI, and now you can opt out of the federal income tax and take your borrowings against your death benefit tax-free. Could you do the same thing with your CLAT for somebody who's domestic, who's selling, who got that check for a factory or something that he sold? Could you do the same sort of strategy with them?
The answer is yes. You could do the same thing. You would probably for a portion of the sale, and that would reduce your taxable event. Certainly, you could do that. Anthony, we think private placement life works really well in the context of overall tax planning. You made a statement early on at the outset, and you said, boy, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I would imagine the market's really saturated, and I would imagine that everyone's doing it. Well, the reality is it's a market. Private placement life insurance has been around for over 20 years, probably close to 30 years. And it comes under the same tax code section as traditional retail life insurance policies, which is section 7702. But for some reason, it hasn't really, it's still a relatively small market. We estimate that the overall market right now for private placement life insurance is maybe $15 billion. When you compare that to retail life insurance products, those of variable life insurance or variable annuities, you're probably talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 trillion or more.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you're talking about two very different markets. So the question is, why has private placement why has it not taken off? Well, one reason is private placement life insurance is a very low-cost life insurance policy. In traditional life insurance, you're focused on providing a death benefit, and that death benefit costs something. Those are called mortality expenses. Mortality expenses in retail life insurance products can range upwards of 2 to 3 percentage points of the assets invested, okay? 200 to 300 basis points.
And that's on an annual basis of your.
It's on an annual basis. So 200 basis points of cost is going to paying broker commissions, mortality expenses, administrative fees, before you even get into the investment costs, which can range, can be another 100 to 150 basis points.
And And this is
Sorry?
what I was when Claudine was asking me about this. She goes, "Well, what makes it so much better?" When I said, doing a whole life and borrowing against a death benefit, and I forgot about the whole cost, the whole cost, because when you're doing it, you're usually to do a 1% a year.
Okay. So here's how it works. Here's what we try to do. Figure that for a private placement life insurance policy, your insurance cost drag is going to be roughly 60 basis points, okay? And the investment costs will be, call it, roughly another 80 to 90 maybe. So all in, you're in for about 1.5% per year versus a traditional retail life insurance policy of about 3.5% all in.
And that's
so
really
you're saving, roughly 2% per year in this type of policy over a retail policy.
And that's really the money you got to give back to and that's why it works with your trust, with your charitable trust, because that too, your savings is, you're basically just giving it to your charity.
You're giving it to your charity, or even if it's not in the trust, effectively what you're doing is that savings is now investment return that's accruing year over year over year. And when you start talking about accruing 200 basis points annually on, let's call it, $10 million, and you're doing that over the course of 20, 30, or 40 years, it's a significant differential, and really makes a strong argument for private placement life insurance over a traditional policy. The second major benefit, and I will get back to your original question, by the way, but I think it's important because we say, what is PPLI? The second benefit of private placement life insurance as compared to a traditional retail life insurance policy is that in private placement, it's sold by private placement memorandum. And so you can customize the investment program. The way the code is written, there's a couple things that you need to have in place for it to pass as private placement life insurance. One is diversification. You have to have 5 discrete investment products or strategies. Those 5 discrete products can be 5 stocks, 5 private equity investments, 5 hedge funds, 5 mutual funds, okay? As long as you have 5 distinct investments, you pass the diversification test.
Well, could you have one? Could you have one? Do you mean you have to have 5 different stocks, 5 different mutual funds, or just you have one stock, one mutual fund?
Right. It could be one stock, one mutual fund, one hedge fund. As long as there's 5 distinct different investment products or strategies in the portfolio.
Okay, so you could pretty much target what you're looking for there with just 5.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if there was now, what's your ownership? I imagine you just can't have, one stock and, 99% of one stock and then the remaining 1% split up between the 4. So what's your ownership cap in any one security?
So the way it works, great question. No one investment can represent more than 50% of the account value.
Okay.
No 2 investments can represent any more than 70% of the account value. No 3 investments, 80%. 4 investments, 90%. More than 90%, and 5 investments have to be 100%.
See, so I told you he's better than most tax attorneys. I told you. He knows it. He's got this stuff. Bill, I want to get on to a next topic on Asians, but I want to add just a couple cents I have onto why PPL hasn't taken off, and just sort of my perspective here. First, who do you go to? What's the PPLI store you go to? Where's the PPI storefront? And the thing is because there's so many players involved, nobody really knows where to go. And I think that's one of the problems. But somebody could go to you for this investment to get the whole ball running. Whereas, if you go to a life insurance, there's one guy to do it. He'll take care of the whole thing for you. With PPLI, you have to kind of have a team going, and you have to have investment advisors. And I think the second reason why is because it's life insurance. And I'll tell you that, as soon as you start talking, people are like, I don't want to pay taxes. I don't want to pay taxes. Oh, what you should do is you should start looking at life insurance. Well, I don't want to die. People get the causation, I think, a little mixed up there. The chances of you dying are rather certain. except me, I think. I might prove them wrong.
You're clearly a forever.
Right, I'm pretty sure. And I think that's one of the things that's holding people back from getting into it. And that's what I see here. Now, I want to get to our next after the break. You and I have had some great growth in our firms from Asia. So I want to talk about that after the break.
With all the political hoopla happening, you may be hearing some of the presidential candidates talking about their tax proposals. But I think Anthony has the winning plan in his awesome tax. Earlier this week, he presented this idea right here on the show. Visit ParentalAdvisoryShow.com and click on podcasts to watch or listen and see if you agree with his ideas. You can follow us on Facebook as well. Let us know if you think his plan would work and submit your very own story ideas. And we are back live on Parental Advisory, joined today by Bill Loftus, one of the founding partners of LLBH Wealth Management. And we're talking about the possibility of opting out of the tax system. And so far, we've learned that PPLI is an option. It's no secret, and it's completely legal.
Right, and it's unused.
Yes.
I mean, underused. It's vastly underused. Bill and I just went over some of the reasons for that, and we hope that people start taking a look at it. The thing I want to talk to you about now in this segment is the Asian market. And it's sort of been, I haven't paid all that much attention to it until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, as we've been doing a lot of offshore voluntary disclosures for people, U.S. persons abroad, with investments overseas, or someone, an expat living in Hong Kong. And that's really where our business has been picking up. So much wealth we have seen. There's so many immigrants, first, second generation immigrants from Far East in America, in Manhattan, and they're in non-tax compliance, and it's been a huge issue, or a huge growth area for us. And I also learned some things about some of the how someone in Asia gets wealthy, and this is how it works. And I've been told the story a few different times, that if you have a factory in China that you're a manager of, China says we don't want to have communism anymore, so they say we need someone to run this, to own it. I want you to be the owner of it, the manager.
Fantastic.
The manager was a farmer 5 years ago, but he says, sure, I guess I will own this factory. And there's sort of a loan with China, but then the factory makes a ton of money. And by a ton, I mean billions. And now this person is worth billions of dollars, yet they don't have the social refinements, and they might be a little bit afraid of humiliating themselves, that they are sort of a new wealth, and they are very, very put off by people who are too stuffy and come on way too strong. And I've been told by people in China, by Chinese nationals, that it's really funny when the firms go over there, they're all trying to out-impress each other with their pomp and circumstance to go after this very new Chinese wealth, and they have it all wrong.
Yes.
That you really want to be down to earth, understand that this person didn't go to all the finishing schools, didn't go to the prep schools you did, that they're just a regular person who's really afraid, that their network of knowledge is really small. They're afraid of the Chinese government. They're afraid of all governments. They're generally afraid, and they really need some people they can trust and people they can relate to.
It would be like if you wanted to take me out for a romantic dinner, it wouldn't be champagne and candlelight. It'd be like shots of tequila and
malt liquor.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that. Now, Bill, what's your perspective?
My kind of girl, by the way.
Bill, have you seen that? Now, maybe you've seen a different kind of client, but that's generally, and I don't mean to say it I'm not trying to say it derogatory at all. It's just that there's a bunch of social signaling that goes on that we all do, that we're all a part of, that sometimes doesn't serve us, that we're not relating with the person from where they are and what their perspective is. So what have you seen?
You're spot on, Anthony. I think that's exactly right. I mean, So let's just, sort of consider who these people are. It's first generation wealth, so they're not particularly comfortable with their wealth, and they certainly haven't been trained in how to manage it, and they're obviously have done incredibly well, far better than perhaps they would have expected. Their challenges are they have children, and their children, it's becoming a global society now, and their children want to come to school in the United States or in England, and this is brand new. They want to make a better life for their family. They are somewhat, we talked about this, they have some concerns about remaining in China, and they would oftentimes like to get a significant part of their wealth out of China. There was a survey done this year and the year before that, and the numbers are about the same. And they posed the question to Chinese millionaires. They said, what are your plans? And 2/3 said, I want to, move out of China. I want to leave China. And the next question was, where do you want to go? And it was probably 2/3 to the U.S. and 1/3 to Europe. So there's a very keen awareness of life in America and in Europe. It's driven by concerns for having a better life for their family. It's driven by concerns of, quite frankly, the climate. Climate was the #1 reason why they wanted to move.
Are you talking about actual climate, like climate, temperature climate?
Temperature climate. Well, it's not just temperature. Remember, it's also pollution and things like that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Pollution in some of the Chinese cities is rather extraordinary. So it's better climate. It's better opportunities for my kids, primarily to educate them. And thirdly, it's better opportunities for myself, i.e., setting up new businesses, investing in real estate, and things like that. So those are the three key reasons why they want to do this. And the place of choice is the United States. And as you know, we have a Los Angeles office. We're seeing towns in Southern California where half to 2/3 of the residential real estate that's being bought is being bought by Chinese citizens, and it's really, really dramatic what's going on right now. So real estate has been the primary investment of choice. Our concern has been that real estate is often bought because they don't really have a knowledge of the U.S. tax system. They come in and they buy real estate in their name, or they buy real estate without,
which is just crazy. I mean, that's so crazy.
Yeah, and so Anthony, what's happening is in many cases, Chinese citizens are being inadvertently brought into the U.S. tax system, and that's a shocker. I'll just give you a quick. We had a group come over to our Los Angeles office, and we were talking to them. They were over on a fact-finding mission. They were, I don't know if you know what an EB-5 program is, but an EB-5 is the U.S. Program that invites, it's a visa, expedited visa process, which invites people to invest in the United States, usually into a project that's EB-5 compliant. And what the project has to do is to employ at least 5 U.S. citizens. So it's usually construction projects, hotels are big, ski mountains are big, condo projects, long-term care facilities, stuff like that. So you'll have Chinese investors investing $500,000 into an EB-5 program, and there are roughly 10,000 EB-5 visas that are given out every year. So they're able to get an expedited visa generally within 4 years. So this was a group that was coming over, and the reason why they do that is it's sort of the first step towards coming into the U.S., becoming a U.S. citizen. Oftentimes they do that because they think they're going to send their kids to school here, either to boarding school or to college, and it's just sort of the first step in the process of leaving China. Well, they came over and they sat with us, and we were talking about taxes. And I went up on the whiteboard and I said, okay, what's this number? I put 55%. And I said, what's that number? And they said, gee, I don't know. And I said, that is the maximum tax rate for a California resident. Okay, ordinary income and state income tax, because California just passed a law last year which takes the max state tax rate to 13.4%.
I'm going to just say I think it's 13.3, but you do tend to know more than I do.
3.3. My mistake. But anyway,
look at that. All right.
but Anthony, the interesting thing was this: in China, they don't have a structural tax rate like we do. It's kind of what you want to pay, and you pay what you pay in 1 year is sort of what you paid the year before, and it's all very fuzzy. Okay, so they don't really think about taxes. It's not part of the investment decision, but you can be certain it's part of the investment decision when they move to the United States. So then on the next page, I said, okay, now what's this? I put a big 0 with a red line through it, and I said, now what's this? And they said, oh, that's 0. I said, exactly, and that's what you're going to pay if you follow these simple steps that we're going to walk you through right now.
Now here's this is, and you're nailing it on the head. What your number one decision when making is your tax burden for investment. You don't think about the investment. You think like, well, what's the net to me? And if you don't think about taxes, you have no idea what your net is, because there's your spread, 55% or 0. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty big spread.
Yes.
And when you become a U.S. person, do these people know that their worldwide income becomes taxable? So whatever you left behind in China, whatever you left in Hong Kong, whatever in Singapore is taxable, and it's reportable on FBAR. And if you willfully fail to file one, there's a 50% penalty that is half the account value that the IRS can impose, and there's a statute of limitations on that for 6 years. So meaning if you haven't filed one willfully for 6 years, that's a 300% penalty. So doing it sort of half and not really seeing the whole way, that the thing is, it's a great opportunity to move from China to America. There's a great savings. There's a great way to do it.
And boy, are we going to make some money off you.
There's a really wrong way to do it, and there's a really right way to do it. And I think that's what I think that's our next topic. Where we're going to, in our next break, we're going to talk about becoming a U.S. person or being a U.S. person in a tax-efficient way. And that's going to be our next after this break.
Great, thank you.
Be sure to tune in to Parental Advisory next week. We have a great lineup of shows for you. On Monday, we'll discuss the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Tuesday's show, we'll talk about Irwin Schiff, who's the famous or infamous tax protester who recently passed away in prison. And Anthony may be stirring up some controversy Friday when he asks, does the King of Thailand have an IRS problem? Tune in to listen live at 11 a.m. or visit parentaladvisoryshow.com to listen to all of our past shows. And thanks to our sponsor, IRSMedic, real tax attorneys for tough tax problems. Visit IRSMedic.com for the latest news on the disaster that is the U.S. tax code. And welcome back to Parental Advisory. We are joined today by Bill Loftus, and we're talking about PPLI.
PPLI, and I think overall we're just talking about all the things that go into being a U.S. person in a tax-efficient way and becoming a U.S. person in a tax-efficient way. One of the issues that I see is that there is such an ignorance of the tax code. And as I spoke earlier this week with politicians on their tax proposals, no one understands it really, except when you start to get into it. And, people, in today's earlier episode, we were talking about when people will come up to a cocktail party and ask me some tax advice. And, here would be somebody, okay, you're a W-2 earner who's making $400,000 a year. You want to know what tax savings you have? You don't have any. There isn't anything. You have such limited things you can do. You're in the worst possible place. The world thinks you're rich, and all of your deductions phase out. Your effective rate is the absolute worst. You're not in a position, you're not big enough to take advantage of anything yet left. Get money is the answer.
It's a great logo.
That's the sort of thing, and that's if I was going to give the advice I would give to anyone who says, "Well, Anthony, I want to make it big in life. I want to be a success." I would say, "Well, it's hard. It's hard, okay? Because if you do the typical success things of going to school, getting a profession, becoming a high-priced lawyer, becoming a high-priced doctor, okay, the tax code is an anchor." Okay, because what you really need is you need that big payday that we were talking about. And I was assuming that you even were going to have to pay taxes on that big payday, but Bill gave a great example on how to get around it. Now, after your payday, now it can go into a tax-efficient strategy. When you're a waged employee, you are not tax efficient. You are not. You are not in any sort of way. You are getting killed horribly. And so that's sort of that is really the biggest challenge of breaking through to the next level, is that you have to understand your number one enemy is the IRS. Okay. And they are there and they're trying to take from you. That's what you have to understand, what you're up against. So, okay, now that's a reality, and I don't mean to be depressing, but that is what I use for my motivation to get to the next level. Because you could be all depressed, right? That's one of the things. You could be all depressed and say, oh, you know what? Life stinks. It's just not fair. You know, it's just, I got a raw deal. You could do that. And that's one of the reasons why I love talking with Bill, because he thinks so good. He gets me motivated that I say, no. You know what? Success in life isn't easy, and it's not for everybody. Success in life has always been hard. Mm-hmm. And there has never been a time in the history of the world where there hasn't been somebody who's been getting screwed over. Yet, there's been successful people throughout the history of the world. So you have to make that decision of what you're going to be. Are you going to be one of those successful people, or are you going to be one of those bitter people? That's where you have to go. My point is that when because your day can come. Your day can come when your ship does sail in. And when it sails in, buddy, you got to do it right. You know, right? Isn't that right, Bill? Because you have
that, brother.
How many of your clients they didn't know this was going to happen, and I think you said something so well there. The Asian market and a lot of your clients, they never anticipated this ever in their life happening.
Right. Exactly. And the good news is when that day comes, there are just so many things you can do. So, I think where we're going with this, Anthony, is we're talking about people, again, coming into the United States. They have an incredible advantage over folks who are already in the U.S. tax system, and that is they get to hit the reset button effectively. They get to start over and to do it the right way. You and I don't have that opportunity to a great extent, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So let's assume, for argument's sake, that you are a Chinese citizen and you have money out of China. Maybe you had an import-export business or a manufacturing business or something like that, and now you have a sum of money, and you want to come into the United States to start a new life. Maybe your kids are going to go to school. Maybe you decided you're going to move to California or Seattle or Miami or New York or wherever. What we're saying is, before you do that, there are some things you need to know. There are definitely ways that you can set up structures that would, primarily offshore structures, okay, in jurisdictions that have tax treaties that are, as we said, completely legal. Places like Barbados, places like the Cayman Islands, places like the Bahamas, what have you, the Cook Islands, Jersey, etc. You can actually set up structures, say an offshore trust, or a limited liability company known as an IBC, International Business Corporation. You set up the structure in this locale. It's completely compliant with local tax laws, and you fund money into these structures, and you can then invest in something like PPLI, what we've been talking about today, in a diversified portfolio, okay, the same kind of way that you'd be investing as if you were investing outside of the PPLI structure, so you're not harmed or discriminated against in any way. But the key difference is this: all those assets that are growing inside this PPLI structure are growing income tax-free, capital gains tax-free, and if it's set up in a dynasty trust jurisdiction, meaning that the trust can live on for successive generations, you can invest estate tax-free. And I mean forever. That is powerful, powerful stuff. Now, you might say, I can do that and still come into the United States and live here and work here and educate my kids? The answer is yes, you can. And so you are a U.S. citizen, okay? And while you're in the U.S. and you're earning money, you'll have to pay U.S. taxes, but you're not going to pay taxes on the money that you planned for in this offshore jurisdiction.
Right, and when I say opt out of the U.S. tax system, I'm saying when your wages are always taxable. There's just there's no way around that. But you're not. That's not really the issue. You're okay with that. You're going to be fine paying that. That's not going to put you in any sort of detriment.
That's right. So what you've done is you've set up this offshore. Let's just take a number. I mean, let's pick a round number. $10 million goes into an offshore trust. It's invested in private placement life insurance. How does it work? Well,
quick question: is that PPLI a foreign life insurance, or is it going to be a domestic U.S. policy?
You can do either. You can do a U.S. compliant policy or a foreign policy. If it's a U.S. compliant policy, it's called a 953D policy. If it's 953D, it would have to be subject to U.S. Reporting requirements. Okay. So, and what we think works for a 953D policy is the evidence or the issuance of an insurance dedicated fund, which is a fund that has been approved to be compliant with U.S. tax laws. We have one at LLBH. Okay, we work with U.S. carriers and we work with international carriers. So we have the ability to work both with onshore and offshore carriers, either through our insurance dedicated fund for U.S. Compliant policies, or offshore, you don't have the same requirements, so you can actually have a little more investment flexibility, and you can invest in something known as managed accounts. Now, managed accounts are highly customized, and you can put things like real estate, venture capital, private equity, stocks, bonds, mutual funds in these managed account policies that you hold offshore.
Now, a question is this: would you advise? Is there a situation? And I know we're short on time here, and boy, we are coming up. Well, you know what? I have a whole other topic, and we're going to get you here again because everything you say gets me think of a million other questions, and because it's only the most complicated thing in the history of the world we're talking about. So I think because I know you have to get going, and
in my mind, it's the second most complicated thing. But
oh, Bill. You know what? It's been such a pleasure, and I'm really hoping that next time you can visit us in studio.
Yeah, hey, Bill. This is so. Our question is: at what kind of asset income level should people really start thinking about contacting a private wealth investor advisor such as LLBH? At what kind of level do you think it starts making sense?
Yeah, Anthony, I think private placement life insurance is a very complicated, time-consuming. It's complicated and time-consuming at the outset, and there are some moving parts. So I really think that you need to be thinking in terms of you should have a liquid net worth of about $5 million to start, and you should be prepared to put, I would think, a couple $1 million into a policy like this, because you have to. If you're using the life insurance side, you have to go through a medical, like a traditional life insurance medical exam. Then you have to have a lawyer, you have to have an investment advisor, and you have to have an insurance company. Now, you and I and our team can certainly put that together very easily. We obviously have the insurance companies, we're the investment advisor, we have the insurance dedicated fund, we've got offshore custodians already set up. So, we are fully operational to do this right now. And there are very, very few people in the world. I would submit there's probably less than 100 investment advisors, insurance people, lawyers who can there's many more who know about this. There's probably 100 to 200 who actually know how to get this done. And probably 100 who know how to get this done for an offshore client.
Yeah, and I would say that's about right, and I agree with you. Yeah,
that you and I happen.
I know. I can't believe it when it was like we were meant to meet each other. That was amazing.
So true. We sat there just sort of staring into each other's eyes over lunch talking about PPLI. So I would say $5 million is probably what you need.
All right, now how should someone contact you? Your website is LLBH pwm.com, and we'll put that up on our site, so people can find that. But is there a number they should call you? Should they ask for Bill Loftus, or should they ask?
Yeah, myself, my colleague, by the way, I've been remiss. My colleague Sarah Simon is with me today.
Hi, how
Hello.
are you?
Well, oh my God, this feels weird now. All of a sudden, oh, she's been watching. Oh, geez. Oh,
Sarah is a lawyer. She went to the University of North Carolina undergrad and law school. And Sarah and I head up the offshore effort at LLBH, along with a gentleman named Peter Little. Peter ran Royal Bank of Canada's Caribbean practice out of Barbados, working with insurance-related, both captive insurance companies and high net worth individuals for the last 11 years. So our international team is comprised of the three of us plus our service team here. So you can call me or Sarah directly. It's Bill Loftus, Loftus. It's 203, area code 203-683-1530.
Or toll free 800-700-5524.
Perfect. Exactly.
I'm on your website. I feel I never really give people plugs when they're on their show, but I mean, I think you have a really special firm, and again, you're really one of the, you're one of the 100. You really are. You're one of the 100 in the world who can actually do all of this stuff correctly. So I really would advise people, when your ship does come in, if it looks like it's on the horizon, to start thinking about PPLI and think about doing things correctly, because again, that range we're talking about is only 55 to 0.
That's all it is. It's a small difference.
That's all.
And if I may, I'd just like to close on sort of one thing. We've talked specifically about taxes, but I want to make it clear that there are a number of other positive benefits that come from doing some planning like this. It's not just income taxes, it can be estate taxes. It's wealth transfer for your family. It's also asset protection. Some of these jurisdictions.
Oh, yeah, we forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah.
And
remember, particularly if you've got concerns about governmental concerns, and I think there's lots of places in the world these days, Anthony, that do. Whether you're in South America or Mexico or China. CERN is maybe what happens, the governmental concerns, clawbacks, things like that. Once you find your way into these jurisdictions that have got very robust asset protection laws there to protect you, the investor, you've got minimal reporting requirements. PPLI does not, you don't generate a tax return with PPLI. You do have FBAR and FATCA reporting, but not tax reporting. You've got robust asset protection, which is there to protect you. So, I mean, it really is, this is a very, very elegant investment solution that it also is a lifestyle protection solution as well.
I love it.
Perfect.
All right, so I'm getting close. I'm getting close to calling you as a client any day now. Any day I'll call the client's line.
I think I need a raise.
Our minimum just went down to $4,999,000.
Fantastic. Well, Bill and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to have you again. Thanks for joining us here on Parental Advisory.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks for joining Parental Advisory, hosted by Anthony Parent, produced by Claudine Gindel, that's me, engineered by Chris Chen. For more podcasts, visit our website at parentaladvisoryshow.com and like us on Facebook to submit story ideas. We'd like to thank our sponsors, IRSMedic.com, the law offices of Parent, and Wynn, LLP, real tax attorneys for tough tax problems.